So I'm Helen Carlström. I work for the international E.ON infrastructure team in Germany.
Hi, my name is Jacob Skogström. I work for the energy infrastructure team in Sweden, in the Ectogrid team.
Yes, and myself and Jacob will now describe what Ectogrid is all about. So Ectogrid is an innovation based on deep knowledge in both heat pump technology and district heating and district cooling. I will first tell you about the background, why we have been developing Ectogrid at all. As you see on this picture, it's taken with one of those cameras that can film temperatures, air camera. And here you can see how heat is being expelled. This normally sits on the roof, and heat is being expelled at the same time as heat is being transferred to the building in either gas pipe or district heating pipes. This urbanization is a fast-growing trend in Europe, and as you see, looking in all the lights here, this is where most energy is being consumed. About half of the energy we consume are for thermal needs, heating and cooling. Many times, actually, heating and cooling is supplied at the same time. Also, thinking about all the activities we have, like for instance, running servers and data centers and a lot of chemical processes and others generate heat, and this heat isn't captured, at least not normally. We have a lot of heat that is captured, mainly because it's connected to district heating grids. But the bigger part of Europe do not have district heating grids. It's rely on gas. Today we do recover the waste heat in many places that do have high temperatures, normally 80 degrees or above. While lower temperature waste heat, like for instance 30 degrees that are expelled from data centers, isn't recovered. And that's for several reasons. Both the technology have been lacking to recover this energy, but also we do lack the infrastructure to recover it. It needs a lot of coordination to make this happen. Instead, what we do is that we rely on combustion, producing new energy with high, not new energy, but the energy with high temperatures that is being supplied. At the same time, we expel the waste energy with the lower temperatures. In old buildings, we have an energy demand that is quite high, but we also have a forward temperature in the building that is quite high, many times because the source of generation was combustion. In new buildings, the energy consumption is much lower, but also the supply temperature in the building for comfort heating is much lower. So for instance, if you have underfloor heating in a new built area, the supply temperature might vary between 30 and 40 degrees. In an older building that is made for gas boilers, the supply temperature might be 80 degrees. But for new buildings, 80 degrees is no longer necessary. Then this implies that you can change the technology to supply this energy. Of course, we do have domestic hot water that still do need to have decent temperature with regards to Legionella and so on. But it's in the range of 60 degrees. I will explain why this is so important. Looking into this development of the district heating technologies, in the older systems we had steam going down in temperature which is to the second generation, which is mainly based on combustion, for instance, coal and gas grids. Then, which is very common, is the third generation district heating grid built on steel piping. Perhaps we do have some waste incineration plants connected to it and similar. We have been exploring fourth generation district heating grids quite a lot in E.ON due to the fact that we would like to build in another technology than steel pipes. What we do see is that a fourth generation, we struggle a bit with the dimensioning of the pipes. The system grow quite large. But still, the upside is that the losses are lower than in traditional third generation district heating grid. But in the end, the source of the generation is quite similar, mainly built on combustion. Now, what we also do see is that we have a large demand of cooling today. Actually, in new built areas, especially areas with a lot of offices, the need of cooling is larger than the need of heating, at least when it comes to capacity. So instead of building one fourth generation district heating grid in parallel with a district cooling grid, the fifth generation, which is the generation we count Ectogrid into, is to combine those two in one grid. Actually, what we do is that we deliver both the heating and cooling needs using two pipes. So now I will explain how this works. What we do have is that we have a number of buildings, and we instead of substations and heat exchangers, we do place heat pumps and cooling machines in each and every building. As you see here, the cooling and heat pumps could also be combined into one machine. So it's actually one machine is doing both the heating and cooling. So what we do is that we have a warmer pipe. The temperature might vary between, for instance, 10 and 35 degrees, depending on the time of the year and the source. We boost it to the temperature that specific building do need. So if this building needs 40 degrees, we boost it to 40 degrees. If another building needs 50 degrees, we boost it to 50 degrees, thus reducing the need of electricity for the heat pumps. If the building do need cooling, we take it from the cold grid. This grid might be between 5 and 20 degrees, for instance. We take it and we put the excess heat back onto the grid. And if the building do have both heating and cooling needs, we balance these needs against each other before putting back the excess on the grid. Also, adding on to this, it's that the pumping is distributed. That means that this grid can go in two directions. It's not one supply and one return pipes. It's actually both. So this is why no one is really downstream in this grid. So being a little bit more detailed and precise on this is that we can connect all different kinds of thermal needs, regardless of the temperature. Of course, we would like to keep the grid material in plastic, as not having a really high temperature in it. And also, what we do see is that the heat pumps do not really benefit from temperatures higher than 35 degrees. But for instance, if we have 20 degrees in the warm line, this means that boosting this to a temperature that might be 40 degrees for comfort heating in the building, it doesn't take too much electricity. So the overall electricity consumption is much lower in this kind of grid than if we had single-site solutions. Also, balancing this between each other means that we can lower the overall installed capacity of the grid. But of course, this will not be a total balance between the buildings all the times of the year. We do need to either expel energy somewhere or add energy somewhere. And this we do in a central energy plant, you could say, and this could be whatever is available. Sometimes it's energy, sometimes it's an air source solution, or even a chemical factory, whatever is available. We do also have the possibility to connect it to, for instance, the return of an existing district heating grid. But the main components is the grid itself, the substations within the buildings that are compressors doing both heating and cooling, being connected in a novel way, also including the distributed pumping. And the main balancing unit. What we also do have is the Ecto cloud solution. So it's the IT solution that connects all this together. We will get back to this in more detail, but what we do is that we've been building a platform based on Microsoft Azure that connects the different components in the system. We do track how the consumption, or we do predict the consumption based on historic data, but we also have information into the system like prices of electricity, grid constraints, but also weather forecasts and so on. We also do see if there are other loads in this area that, for instance, electric cars, we need to prioritize which one to use. So it's an electric system, but it could also have other components to it. But to be able to electrify these kind of thermal system within cities, we do need to be careful about the capacity, also about when we use the electricity. So adding on to this, and Jacob will show that later, is that we have a balancing unit. It can vary in size, but the purpose of the balancing unit is that if we have, for instance, need of cooling throughout the day, the offices, when they're being cold, that waste energy is going into a normal water tank, you could say, saved for later use, going back. That energy is then being used at the residential buildings when they come back and would like to use domestic hot water at night, for instance. If there is a lot of room available, if it's a possibility, it's nice to have a big tank. But if there is not a lot of space, we do put a smaller tank. So this is a part of the hydraulic solution. We will show this later on with the picture. So what we will dive into is a tour of Medicon Village, which is the first Ectogrid we have built. We now have more, but this is a really nice site where we combine both existing buildings and new buildings, mainly commercial buildings with both heating and cooling needs, but also adding on some residential buildings. The residential buildings are the red ones you can see here, and in this case we do not yet have cooling to these due to building regulations. What we are doing is we recover quite a lot of waste heat from big freezers that are in this area. It's medical research facilities, and about 2,000 people work here. So I hand on to Jacob. I think it might be a good time.
All right. Thank you, Helen. I will start sharing my computer. So I will give you a short tour of the Medicon Village site. I just wanted to give you a grasp of where we are in the world. So if we see Europe and we zoom in to beautiful Sweden, oops, not Copenhagen, go away. This is Sweden, and Malmö right across from Copenhagen is very close to Lund, where Medicon Village is. Malmö is where I'm located with E.ON, and Malmö is also a place where we have lots of innovation projects, for example, for district heating. If we go deeper into Lund, we will see that Medicon Village is this yellow area right here. I will also show you this using a 3D map. So what we just saw is pretty much this. So these buildings are from AstraZeneca that had a production site in Lund, and when they left the area, there was a new foundation called Medicon Village formed. Just like Helen said, they work a lot with medical, healthcare, and everything in medtech. So the Ectogrid is being stretched across this site to connect these 15 buildings, and this is an old 3D map actually. So you can see there's an area here where there's a new head office for the Medicon Village. I will show you this. And also Helen showed you on the concept image 3 residential buildings on this side of the road, actually belonging to a different customer. I will use a tool called HoloBuilder to give you this tour. I will try to move slowly so there's no lag for you in the video. This building that we start with is the actual main building that was not on the 3D map. It's the head office, about 14,000 square meters. I will later on also go into the basement and show you the energy central for this building. First off, I just like to give you a quick tour of the campus. I will do this by clicking these different arrows. So also missing on the 3D map were the 3 residential buildings on the other side of the road, and this is these buildings. That's what you were missing before. If we continue to walk on the grounds of Medicon, we will head up to what we call one of the components that were the balancing unit that Helen explained. It was a very sunny day when I took these photos. Okay, so now we're up by our balancing unit, and what we see here is actually 2 parts. It's the passive balancing unit, which is the tower, and it's the active component, the active balancing unit over here. We will see that more in detail later on. Helen was talking about how this is working, and you can see it as a storage for both heating and cooling, where the heating is stored at the top of the tank and the cooling is stored at the bottom of the tank. So 2 pipes are going in that you can see here. One is actually going in at the bottom, connecting to the cold side and the cold flow, and the other one is actually going into the tank at the top. We also have temperature sensors to know where the level between heating and cooling is inside the tank. And it could look something like this in the night time, if I enlarge this. So the sensors tell us where is the border between warm water and cool water. So we're not using any special weights. We're using the stratification, pretty much like if you've been swimming in a lake during the summertime, you know that when you dive deeper into the lake, there can be quite a jump in temperature. And this is because the cold water is heavier and going to the bottom, and the warm water stays on top. So the same goes here, that when we add our fluid into this tank, we try to make as little turbulence as possible. So this is what the tank looks like during the night, and in this case we have both heating and cooling in the tank. If the tank looks like this, it means either that we need to remove some of the heat from the system. It could be during the summertime, for example, or it can be that the system knows that there is a lot of heating needs the coming 18 hours and has prepared for these deliveries by actually creating the heat during a time when the electricity was cheap, for example. I can also show you what the pipes look like. They are the plastic piping that goes in the ground. It can look like this. We also have, so they're created in great lengths, and then they are quite fast and easy to put in the ground. So you can dig the trench and just push them in there. And they are inexpensive plastic piping that was discussed. And in this case, we actually use uninsulated piping to be able to work with the ground surrounding the pipes as a thermal inertia. So, for example, if we have lots of heat in the summertime, we can raise the temperature inside the pipe so that this excess heat that we want to get rid of is actually going into the ground. And the same goes for the cold period of the year when we actually want to use the pipes as a collector. We lower the temperature inside the pipes, and the heat is actually leaking into the pipe instead. Sometimes people ask what the heat pumps are look like. We will see those in the basement as well. Also, the energy manager, which is the E.ON component connecting the building management system of each building with our cloud control system, Ecto Cloud, that Helen was talking about. Let's see if we close this, we can. So now we know the passive balancing unit, and if we'd like to see, in this case, the active balancing unit is consists of 2 carrier heat pumps, and they are reversible. So when we have too much heat in the system, we can expel heat using these into the air. And the opposite goes for if we don't have enough heat inside the Ectogrid system, we can actually retrieve heat from the air and push it into the Ectogrid system. To be able to use a pressured system, we also need these expansion vessels situated in these gray containers in between the 2 heat pumps. All right, so that was pretty much the tour for the balancing unit. We will head back and see the energy central. So we'll go back to the 601, and this is the place where we will go into the energy central. So for this big building of about 14,000 square meters, we only have 1 heat pump supplying this building with comfort heating and tap hot water. They can be separate heat pumps, but this is a design question and cost question, of course. So in this case, we use 1 heat pump and 3 cooling machines on the other side of the aisle. We will start by looking at inside the control cabinet. I showed you a picture before of the E.ON Energy Manager. So this is all the control equipment that is needed to run the equipment in this basement. And we need this gateway, the E.ON Energy Manager, in order to connect to the Ecto Cloud. So when connecting a new building, we agree on a certain set of signals that needs to be passed through. And this is then programmed with PLC coding. And this way we have the possibility to communicate with the building and place suggestions on how to run the system optimally. It's not being forced, it's only recommendations, and if it accepts, fine, and if it has something else to do in this building that is more important, it will deny the request. So if we move along here to in the aisle, we will see the cooling machines on the right side and the heat pump on the left side that we talked about. So it's a very modular system. If we would need, if we would have an increased demand for heating or cooling, we could simply add on another heat pump or cooling machine. If we look at the heat pump, we can also discuss one of the innovations with Ectogrid. Normally in a district heating grid, there's always a big circulation pump creating rotation of the fluid in the system, going forward and then back on the return pipe. In Ectogrid, we have smaller pumps instead in each building, removing the large pump in the outside grid. And these small pumps only attract the liquid needed in order to create the heating and cooling needed for this building. So this means that if no building actually needed any heating or cooling in the Ectogrid, the liquid in the pipes would be standing still. This also means that it can be a bi-directional grid, depending on where there is a need for heating and cooling. But just like Helen explained before, for the heat pump side, this is the pipe coming from the warm pipe of the Ectogrid coming into the heat pump, and the cool-off flow coming from the heat pump is now placed on the cool pipe of the Ectogrid. And the opposite goes on the cooling side. You take from the cool pipe, and the cooling machine adds the heat that the building doesn't need, and this heated flow is returned on the warm pipe of the Ectogrid. So I will also give you a quick look around into our showroom. In case you ever visit Lund, you should come by and get a tour of this. So in our showroom, we have different concepts talking about the challenges of the world and how we will need to move along in order to reduce our CO2 footprint. We will talk about the innovation around Ectogrid and why we've created it, and a bit of thoughts from our main inventor, Dr. Per Rosén. It also explained the basic thinking behind energy sharing between buildings, how this is possible, and how this can happen. So we've created something called the Ecto table, where we can place different blocks, and on the screens you get instant feedback of the electricity and this power, where it is produced and how. Of course, we would like to use only renewable power with the Ectogrid, then we consider it as a zero emission system. We also talk about and show the heating and cooling needs that EctoCloud takes into account before creating the predictions, which is the order to run different equipment over time in order to produce most often as cheap energy as possible. But also, like Helen was talking about, maybe stepping away from electrical usage at some points of the day when many others are using it. Of course, we show some different projects that we've built, and yeah, that's a quick tour of our showroom as well. So that's pretty much what I had in mind. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out.